All right, we are live, and on today's episode, alongside co-host Bianca Leger, we interview a soul worker, a licensed psychotherapist in Texas, an eco-psychologist who's completed his master's in clinical psychology at the California Institute of Integral Studies. He's also attained his master's of science and is committed to helping purpose-driven individuals nurture an intimate relationship with soul so they can lead from wholeness. Welcome to the Winner Circle, Michael Ebbinghaus.
Thank you, Derek. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Bianca.
Bianca and I are excited to connect with you and learn all about your hero's journey, which brought you to where you are today. And the goal of all our episodes is to really uplift, inspire, and empower others listening on their hero's journey ahead. And as such, our questions tend to be very positive and uplifting. And this first question starts us off on such a foot. And that is right here, right now, Michael Ebbinghaus, what do you love about your world right now? Not about the external, what's going on outside, but what do you love about your
Mm, that's a wonderful question. What I love most about my world right now is I feel very connected to my own experience and particularly the land on which I live. So I'm in Austin, Texas right now. I was born here, and I developed a very close relationship with a certain region of Austin, a certain valley, if you will. And I feel through my being that I'm very connected. So, like for example, last year, it was a very like mild summer. It was just absolutely gorgeous. There was a lot of rain and water was flowing through the land, and I very much felt that in my own being and like in my relationships and what I was doing. And this past summer was very like hot and dry. And I very much felt that reflected in my being and in my relationships as well. I felt like I was very much under the very hot summer sun, getting by like the desert creatures do on very little. And now that the rains have come again, I'm starting to feel that kind of rejuvenation of my spirit. So I feel very connected to my world. I feel very connected to the world of spirit, and like I'm doing exactly what it was that I took this form to do. And yeah, what a gift.
Wow,
world? Mhm.
that's a powerful feeling.
Mm, very much so.
Yeah. Um,
So, one way we get to know our guests is by asking them their mission here in this reality plane. And that is the mission that overrides and guides you in all that you do as a soul worker, as a psychotherapist, a friend, as a citizen of the
Mm.
valley in Texas that you love, a citizen of Austin, Texas, like it, it guides you in all that you do. So, what is your personal mission here on this earth?
My personal mission here on this earth. Well, I think the first and foremost is just to fully enjoy the fact that we are here, that I am here, and not buy too much into like that there has to be some purpose, or there has to be some mission that I'm serving. Of course, that is something that guides me, but if I lose sight of being here in the present moment and really just loving everything that is, then the mission doesn't really, you lose a lot of juice towards serving the mission. But my mission here on earth is to, yeah, was really just to embrace and embody who I am. And who I am is a deeply curious human being. I've always been deeply curious, and I've always kind of viewed that as like a love story between me and nature, or between me and the universe, is like this really like coming to know, is like, I just want to know you. I just want to know you, spirit. I want to know you, Pachamama. And through my being and through pursuing what's delightful to me, also being delightful to others and helping them find delight in what they love doing, and realizing that, yeah, this is all very, it all feels very real and very serious, but at the same time, this is an act of creation and an act of play that we're all getting to co-create.
mhm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it is attractive.
Amazing.
It's very attractive to see somebody be in their joy and be like, how do they figure that out?
Yeah, and the figuring is where we can really get caught, especially if you're like me and you love the knowing. And
Uh-huh.
if like but I got to figure it out. It has to be figured out. It's like, actually,
Getting
it's
to
all
know yourself.
here. Right? Yeah. Yeah. Getting to know yourself. Exactly.
Uh-huh. Beautiful.
So these conversations are called Welcome to the Winner Circle. And I believe stepping into the winner circle is a choice. And let me define winning from my lens, from
Mm,
my view. And winning to me is enjoying the process, enjoying the journey, enjoying the sweetness of the song. We live in a society that is very destination oriented. I want to get this job, this relationship, this car, this degree, et cetera, then I'll be
mhm,
happy. And maybe when we get there, there's a momentary spike of dopamine, spike of feel good, and then it's now what? Now what's next? Because we're missing the song. So to me, winning is stepping forward, moving forward, embodying our greatest self, embodying that who we already are. Everything is now. And to me, that's winning the process over the destination. Everything
mhm,
that we're searching for is already here. And it doesn't take huge steps. It could be as simple as taking a breath,
mhm,
um, sitting a bit more upright, being attuned to the vibration we're sending out and taking in, being present. All those move us to where we wish to be, where we already are. So to me, that is winning. What does winning mean to you? And what does living that win look like for you in your life today?
mhm. Yeah. To me, winning, Derek, I think you put it really, really beautifully. Is that kind of like transcending the win-loss duality. That kind of just like you really you win the game when you realize that all the finite games that you're playing are those that are caught in the duality, and that really the game that you want to be playing is the infinite game. And the infinite game is the one where we're like we all the purpose of playing the game is to keep playing. And the way you describe it is exactly how you keep wanting to play the game, is that you yeah, you just are alive with the process, because you don't want to just be at this place where it's just like total satisfaction all of the time, because then there's nothing to strive towards. But when you can fully embrace and appreciate the triumphs and the failures, yeah, it's like you can kind of so your way through it, as in saying like, so, and it's just here's another appearance and how this is all going. So winning, I would say, is the completion of the alchemical process, the sacred marriage, right, or the Mysterium Conjunctionis, where you've produced the Philosopher's Stone, and now you greet all of experience as a gift and as a moment of creation, rather than reifying it into something concrete and unmovable.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
Very well said. And so, what does this look like for you in your day to day? What does life look like for you in this moment? In this
Yeah,
point.
it's really wonderful that we're speaking at this time, because I feel like I have this whole lifetime has been a journey, and I'm certainly on one of like the high points of it. I just got my license. We're going into autumn. I can feel autumn coming into the hot Texas, the hot Texas sun, which is just blissful and wonderful.
Mm.
And it doesn't always look that way, like I said, this past summer has been very, very challenging in many ways. And the way that I've been able to alchemize that process, or be with all of that, is to be with it. I'll give an example. Over this past summer, I was working 2 different jobs, and just to kind of keep, make ends meet and all this stuff. And so I was working as a prep cook at a kitchen, and carrying water for a live water. And so it was this kind of interesting thing where I was like, I wasn't chopping wood and carrying water, I was chopping vegetables and carrying water. But there was a moment that I had um, when I was driving the delivery truck, and something that I kind of realized over God speaks in everything, but I was like, God really speaks on the route. And so there's these 2 green handles that we have that we used to carry the water around, and I misplaced one of them. I couldn't find it, and I was like, it's fairly crucial to the job. It's like, it makes the job a lot harder if you don't have them, right? Um, and I looked all over and I was like, I can't find it. It must be here somewhere. Maybe I left it at, one of the past deliveries. So I like went and like looked, I couldn't find it. And so I looked in the truck again and I was like, okay, it has to be somewhere in here. And it was lodged in like the most like obscure spot. I was like, how the fuck did it end up here? And then I just had this voice come and greet me and said, that thing that you're looking for, out here, it's been with you the whole time. And then I just, it was probably kind of a sight. I was out in front of like a previous delivery and I was just sitting at the steering wheel, like sobbing, because it was just that moment of like, here's that lesson that you've been looking for, and here in that challenge and in that searching, you've been searching everywhere it isn't, and it was in the last place that you wanted to look.
Mm. Oh my God. That's so powerful, so metaphorical and beautiful.
And so mundane too, right?
Yes, it's all in the small things every day. Yeah. Wow.
So before we delve into your origin story and how you got here, let's take a moment to celebrate some of your wins. So often I feel we don't do that. Celebrate our accomplishments and really be with what we've accomplished and the journey it took us to get there. So often we attain our wins and it's like, oh, yay, and then we kind of forget about all the work we put in. So let's take a moment to just celebrate some things that you are most proud of accomplishing on your journey thus far.
The first thing that comes to mind is the circle of people that I found myself in. I'm really grateful. Like Derek, you're a great example. Bianca, I hope that you're another great example as this is evolving. But I am so grateful for my dearest friends, some of whom I've known for 10 years or more, some of whom I've only known for a few months, but the communities that I've found myself in here in Austin have just been incredibly supportive. I feel like I can be totally myself, and including all of the not just the great and the agreeable parts of myself, but the wounded and tragic parts of myself as well. I just feel totally held, and like that can all be seen with a group of friends that I've found myself in. So my community, huge win. This whatever Austin is becoming, a huge win. I think it's really a win, and I'm sure we'll get to this later in the show. But being given a very clear message to awaken and to journey through that, and to open myself up to the unknown and to the mystery, and having first the curiosity and then the humility to be able to follow all of that and to check my assumptions and my biases and my paradigms at every turn, and just use that as a continual process of transformation. That's led me not only to feel like very deeply invigorated by, say, the credentials that I've been able to earn, like the degrees that I have, and the work that I'm now able to practice, and I'm able to call myself a psychotherapist, which after 3 years feels so good. But also, that's those are my credentials that like the culture has given me, and I feel incredibly thankful. And it's a massive win to I could go and grab it in a second here, but those are my man-made credentials, or my cultural credentials. But I also have I carry a staff with me that was given to me by that valley that I mentioned earlier, and it came at a very crucial time. And that's, for me, is like, it's a living embodiment and reminder of the fact that we are not the only conscious beings in existence, that consciousness actually seems to be ipso facto part of this entire experience in this universe. That there's extraordinary intelligence and connection through nature and through whatever lies beyond nature. And man, to be able to recognize that, that's what helps you step into the winner circle, man. That's what makes it like, oh yeah, I really am infinitely interconnected with everything else. There is a massive awareness and massive source of love that is just like totally attuned to not just myself, but all of us and all of the beings everywhere. But it also is just like, it knows me on a level that I can't even comprehend.
Mhm. So let's now trace your journey to that valley, to finding that staff. And we could go
Hmm.
back as far as back, but let's talk about your origin story. What led you to where you are today? Maybe we start. Is that something that started when you were growing up? Your call to connect with nature, connect with soul, connect with spirit. I don't know. Let's
Hmm.
examine that. Let's examine the origin story of Michael Eben.
I would be very pleased. I love talking about myself. So yeah, man, it really has been part of me from the very beginning, you know, ever since I call it coming online, you know, ever since I could remember things when I was like 3 or 4 years old. I've always had a very deep curiosity and desire to know things. I remember you know, my favorite phrase was how and why. I would just always ask my dad, like, how does this work? Why does this work? What does this do? You know? And that was just a constant source of those were my favorite phrases when I was growing up. And as I continued, you know, I had a really deep fascination with nature and just curiosity with everything. Steve Irwin is one of my heroes, because he really embodied that love of nature. And he was just like, you know what? I just need to. How do I get people to fall in love with nature? I'm going to get on camera and show them how much I love it, and that translated like perfectly. And I remember like learning about nerves when I was 8 years old or so, and I was like, wait a minute, so you're telling me that there actually has to be like a direct connection to every single muscle in our body? And I was just like, I that blew my mind when I was like 8 years old. And so I've always been really deeply fascinated with nature, with the body. It's one of the reasons why I feel so thankful that I was able to study medicine. I got to work studying cadavers back in back at that master's program, UNC Health Science Center. But yeah, just a deep curiosity with everything. And also coming with that curiosity meant also that I was going to come into conflict with certain societal and cultural structures that I was encountering, because especially in the paradigm that we're set in, there's like this great emphasis on scientific certainty. And that's the thing that I've kept threading, is that, well, to be a scientist, and I prefer the term natural philosopher, but to be a scientist, you're continually taking in evidence and you're weighing it against everything that you actually do have an understanding of and know, and you're constantly growing that understanding. So you're checking what you don't know, you're growing and expanding, and you're also looking out for like what resonates and what doesn't. And so that was definitely something I was going to come into a lot of conflict with, especially since I was raised Catholic and there was a lot of religious trauma to overcome. Um, and so yeah, I was just very. I wanted to delve into the unseen and the unconscious, and to me, that was a very real, concrete reality. I'm very thankful because there were certain family members of mine that had you know, very esoteric experiences. My grandmother had an out of body experience, a near death out of body experience, which always kind of like informed my idea of what's possible. And certainly the event that woke me up came from a place of very deep pain. So when I was just on the verge of 14, my folks split up. My parents got divorced and my mom moved away. And my mom and I had a super close relationship. And at that stage in my development, I'm just like starting to like, you know, separate from my parents and like become my own person. And then she left, and I was left with this like really tremendous abandonment wound. And not only that, but now it was just my father and me, and my sisters were both moving out of the house at the time. And my father was also deeply wounded from, you know, from this as well. And so I kind of felt like I was really alone in all of this. And like there was really no like adult around for me to gravitate towards and grow towards. And so I was really based, you know, my folks had kind of like realized that I was really curious, and they really fostered my intellectual development. I got really attached to my inherent intelligence, my definitions of what that was, which namely was, you know, being able to do well in school without trying too hard. And whenever I went off to university, I really, began my hero's journey, right? When I left home, when I left the familiar, now I'm on my own. I'm integrating like being with people my own age, not having the parental oversight for the first time. And also now having to enter actually rigorous courses of study. Can't just getting by, not able to get by on the patterns and structures that I had driven me that thus far. And I met with a lot of conflict because now that ego structure, that thing that really gave me a lot of security, which was my innate intelligence, not being able to try too hard and do well in school, was being met with a reality that was different. And so I'd been really well supported. Society had done that. My parents had done that. I went to university on full scholarship, so I literally didn't have to pay anything. It was all taken care of. And as I started to struggle, then I was faced with the possibility of losing that. And that's when I really started to like begin dancing with depression and with masochism and that kind of because then it was like, well, if I'm so attached to this identity, of course, 18, 19-year-old me wouldn't speak in these terms. This is how I'm reflecting upon it now. But because I was so attached to that identity, well, if I can't do well in school, then there must be something wrong with me, right? And so I kind of like split back and forth for a few years. By the time I'm a junior in college, I've been depressed for about 2 years and contemplating suicide for about 6 months every day. So pretty severe suicidal ideation. I kind of contemplated it a little bit, but like this period of my life is very grim. Like I was literally going to bed every night, hoping that I wouldn't wake up the next morning, and every morning just about waking up saying like, fuck, here we go again. That was the loop that I was caught in. And so this kind of reached a logical conclusion to a point where I was in danger of like actually losing my scholarship. I was like, this is it. I'm not going to be able to do it. This is the last like vestige of any worth that I have is this scholarship. And so if this is gone, it is tantamount to death and, psychologically. And so when you're stuck in a paradigm where this is the only concrete reality and what you can see and observe and replicate is the only thing that you could describe as being real, then the only conclusion is to say, well, then I must, and this was the narrative in my head is I am unworthy. I don't even deserve to live. And so you actualize that, you externalize it, and you say like, well, then I should really kill myself. And so, that thread has been kind of developing in me for those 6 months. And on this pivotal evening, this would have been probably about 8 years ago now. 8 or 9 years ago, I was sitting underneath my desk and I had finally decided that, this is it. I don't want to go any further. I'm wasting the life that the God that I don't even believe in anymore gave me. And the only righteous thing to do is to end it. And so I'm sitting underneath my desk at university. I'm really caught in this conflict, right? Because I'm terrified. I don't really want to die, but there's this other voice inside of me that's saying, you fucking coward, just drag that knife down the length of your arm and kill yourself. Why can't you do this? So there's this like split, right, in my psyche. And so I'm caught in this loop. I'm terrified. I don't know what to do. And I'm at the very bottom. And somewhere in this time, still sitting underneath my desk, I hear the phone ring on top of my desk. And so I reach up and I grab it, and it's my dad. And pretty much every time before or since then, when my father calls me, it's a really jubilant occasion. He always says, "Hey, Pancho, how you doing?" He's just always happy to hear from me. This evening, he answers the phone in a really solemn tone, and he says, "Hey, are you okay?" I say, "No, I'm not really doing too well." And he said, I can't explain it. I had this horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I knew that I needed to reach out to you." And then he gave me, all of the beautiful things that a father would say in this moment, which is, whatever you're going through, like you're going to get through it. I support you in whichever ways that you need to be supported. Just let me know, that sort of thing. But he had already cracked the shell of that little microcosm that I was in, which was I am a separate being in a cold and uncaring universe that just began as a complex billiard ball game 14 billion years ago with the Big Bang, right? Because in that moment, as soon as he said, I had a feeling in my body and I knew I needed to call you, I was like, there was something that was connecting us. And it wasn't direct observation. He didn't know, he couldn't see, he couldn't hear. I didn't tell him any of this. It was just happening simultaneously in the moment. And what's more, he acted on it. And I was like, and as a scientist and as a natural philosopher, I said, this is incontrovertible evidence that I need to explore further because there is clearly something here. There's something beyond me that is dearly compassionate and wants me to stick around, and who knows, maybe even has a mission for me. But that kind of pulled me out of the grip of my despair, and also the illusion of separateness just totally washed away. And it took me a few years to kind of come to the understandings that I do now, but that was really the beginning of my healing journey and the beginning of an idea that I'm not only in a universe that's supremely connected and compassionate and wants us all to be, the fullest expressions of who we are, but there's also things about myself that I do not understand. There's an ecology within, and so that's kind of when I started working on that. And the mission that I had was still really wrapped up in that like achievement-based ego. Like I wanted to be the one that did it, like the savior. I had a huge savior complex with all of this. And for a while that's still stuck in the material realm. I went and studied medicine. And I was like, well, I was really into transhumanism at the time as well. And so I was very fascinated with like, naturally moving prosthetics with, and also like the cognitive prosthetics. I was really fascinated by cognitive prosthetics. Like, how can I increase consciousness through technology? Well, first I had to learn what consciousness was. And then I had to learn what an expansion in consciousness would be. And the journey that took me on was, oh, wait a minute. What am I talking about? We don't need technology to increase consciousness. People have been doing it for thousands of years through drumming, through psychedelics, through community, through dancing, through all of these things. I was like, okay. So I was in a neuroscience program. I was doing some pretty cool work in a neural interfaces lab because I was, very much trying to get to that stage where I could develop a cognitive prosthesis to expand consciousness. And then I stumbled upon Aubrey Marcus and the work of Max. And the interviews with Aubrey on Aubrey's podcast that really drew me were the ones with Rick Doblin, Stanislav Grof, and Paul Chek, all of whom were talking about psychedelic psychotherapy, about how crazy the results were from MDMA assisted psychotherapy. And Paul Chek, who really kind of reintroduced me to the idea of what God could be. And so I don't even remember how I stumbled upon Aubrey's podcast, but there was this aching in my heart that was like, you need to go work for this man's company. That was like my first like intuition that I like really acted upon. And so I go on the On It site and I'm like, okay, what jobs are available? It's like, okay, gym attendant, cool. So I apply for gym attendant. I never hear anything back about that one. But I'm just like, okay, well, whatever. There's still that voice inside of me that's just like, just keep checking back every day and see what postings come up. And so I do that for about 2 weeks, nothing comes up. And then lo and behold, what do I see is a position for a personal assistant to the CEO, which Aubrey was at the time. And I was like, holy fuck. I'm not just going to go work for this guy's company. I'm going to go work for Aubrey. And so I'm like, is it happening? Is it happening? So like, I have total confidence in this moment. I submit everything. And long story short, I end up becoming Aubrey Marcus's personal assistant. That was a long and fun and interesting journey. I think the most important aspect of that was that I met Eric Godsey, who reintroduced me to the idea of depth psychology, because Ghazi at the time and still is, was deeply, deeply fascinated with Carl Jung. And I'd been kind of like laughed out of a psychology degree at UT Dallas because I'd mentioned my fascination with Freud, and everyone in that paradigm at the state school was like, oh yeah, like you think Freud had anything good to say? Like you must be a fucking idiot, you know? And so I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll go the neuroscience route, you know, get something more hard science. But Ghazi really reintroduced me to that aspect of there is a living mystery and there are people who have explored it. And also around this time, I started seeing my therapist, Theo, who is not a Jungian analyst, but who draws deeply on that work. And when I started working with him, probably a week after I started working with him, this is the first of the synchronicities introduced by Theo, was that the first time I met with him, he said, you're about to go on a journey. And the week after that, I ended up getting fired from on it. I had just broken up with a woman who I dated for about 4.5 years. And so now I was in this complete element of the unknown. And I had a dream that coincided with the starting of that therapy and the starting of that journey that essentially laid all of that out. And the dream was extraordinarily powerful. I'd only had like 3 dreams like that in my lifetime before that. And it was really like the dream that I had that kind of began my fascination with the unconscious. Because, you know, like you have dreams sometimes and you're like, oh, that was kind of quirky or interesting, but whatever. This was like, you know, I remember floating in, I'm just like a point of perspective floating in. There's this great dark tower standing up. It looks exactly like the Tower of Isengard in Lord of the Rings. And I'm sitting in the top room of this tower, and there's been a quadruple homicide taking place out on the balcony. There's like scarlet drapes that are flowing, and I can see the blood coming in from the outside. And I can only see one of the people, and it's my ex-partner. And Jung would call that an anima image, right? It was my inner feminine projected onto her. And so in that too, there's the death of 4 people, and 4 is always not always, because symbols they have contextually dependent meaning, so they can mean many different things. But 4 is usually, that's the squaring of the circle, right? It's the bringing of the infinite down into the finite sort of thing. So I experienced a death of myself in all directions, if you will, because I lost my partnership, I lost my community on it, I lost my job, I was having to move as a result of all of this, and so I was like totally in the unknown. So phase 2 of the hero's journey starts. And then it's really like, okay, like where am I going with all of this, which eventually led me to CIIS, to starting my journey as a psychologist and as a therapist, and really kind of delving deeply into that mystery. And of course, I'd had some it's really cool how all of these are intertwined, because like the number 4, whenever I experience groups of people in my dreams, it's always 3 men, 1 woman, which I feel like is the constitution of a male dominated psyche, right? Is like, I'm male identified, but there is a woman within me that is my inner feminine, that is my anima. Whereas in a feminine dominated personality, those 3 would be women with 1 male, the animus, right? And certainly before, yeah, there's so many different directions I could go with this, because that dream was really powerful. That motif of 4, that motif of how they're split gender wise is very, very interesting, because to bring psychedelic experiences into it, I'd had 2 experiences with LSD in my early 20s. One was really great, and so I figured more was better. And so I did a second journey with twice the dose, and was not ready for the kind of experience that would be. That was deeply, deeply terrifying. Really brought me into contact with that masochistic part of my psyche. It was the experience that I had with that was dominated. I have a lot of Lord of the Rings imagery because I'm really drawn to that stuff, and I also think it's just like archetypically perfect. But was the Eye of Sauron. The Eye of Sauron was just like staring at me, whether my eyes were closed, whether my eyes were open. I could feel myself just getting roasted, like physically burning and sweating. And I could hear his voice in my head, the Morgul tongue and the whole like you're not enough and you're all that stuff. And so it turned me off from psychedelics for quite some time until just before going back to On It. I want to hold the Eye of Sauron in our awareness here because I believe what I encountered there as the Eye of Sauron, I encountered again in my first experience with dimethyltryptamine or DMT, except how I was relating to that part of myself was very different. And so just prior to going to On It, I sit with DMT, I smoke it, and I instantly kind of lose all awareness of myself. I'm listening to music at the time. It's First Breath After a Coma, which feels very appropriate given the ceremonial context by Explosions in the Sky. And I experienced myself as being the music. Like I knew it so viscerally, like I know my own body. I could see the music kind of waving in through like, it was like different shades of black, and it brought me to this plane, and nothing I'd ever heard of like ever prepared me for this experience. But I went in with the total intention to surrender, and what I came to was this kind of like amorphous, like red and green, like energy world, and sitting in front of me was an altar. On top of that altar was a floating orb, and again, sitting across from me was a woman who was hooded, and on either side of me were two men, also hooded. And the woman sitting across from me instructed me to breathe from the orb whenever she commanded at the snap of her fingers. And so not only did I inhale a physical substance here in this plane and was transported to another one, but now I was being asked to take another sacrament in this plane, which for all intents and purposes, I would describe as the underworld. And so she asked me to breathe from that orb at the snap of her fingers. And this is how quick she snapped. Like that. So each time I breathe from the orb, I discover as I take my first breath, I like switch. I go counterclockwise and I sit in a different position in the circle. And so you can kind of imagine at that pace and I do that every time. It's like very quick and dysregulating, and it gets quicker and quicker and quicker. And then blasting off, right? Blasting off into the white tunnel of light, feeling like recognizing everything that I am connected to everything and everyone viscerally, genetically. I can see the great chain of DNA like going back to the primordial ocean, and I feel my connection to those ancestors, those very first little primordial bacteria in the ocean. I'm like, oh wow, I'm a part of that, and I feel that, in every sense of my being. And after I come through the tunnel of light, I'm kind of sitting with I'm looking at this big blue orb, and I believe that this big blue orb and the Eye of Sauron are actually the same exact entity, it's the self, right? What Jung would call the self. And because I went into this with surrender, and unlike my earlier LSD experience, was holding on to my ego structure with every bit of will and strength that I had, because I was willing to let go. This thing was this orb of pale blue light was pouring love into me. And what this did was it attracted all of my shame to it like a magnet. Like it was pouring love into me, and like there was no room for the shame. So it was all coming out. And so I would feel all of the love coming in, and there would be these barriers, and I would say, but what about this? It would take it and would say, oh, that, more love. And that also kind of turned into a chain reaction where it would fill me with more love, and some deeper shame would come up, to the point where it finally dawned on me that I was like, oh my God, I don't have to do anything. I'm already so loved. There's nothing that can stop this infinite orb of love from pouring into me. And of course, when you come back from an experience like that, it's like, okay, well, now you know it, now you've experienced it, and yet here is you not totally loving yourself. And so it's like, how can you shift into that awareness? Because as I really needed that experience. I really needed that experience to be able to know what it was like to experience infinite compassion and truly unconditional love for the first time. Because as humans, we cannot give it. Not even we can't even give it as mothers and fathers. You know, it's we're imperfect, but that doesn't mean that we can't love ourselves in the same way. And so that really began more of a journey of like, well, how do I start to solidify that? And part of that journey was going to the Center for Integral Studies, and learning as much as I could, and doing the deep personal work of confronting the different shadows that I had, namely being so fucking identified as a good guy, white knight savior, that, you know, there were these parts of me that were like, you know, that were that really needed to be needed, you know, that made me very codependent, that I really wished others wouldn't do so well, because then it would reflect better on me, that sort of thing. And really like acknowledging and accepting those parts of myself. And yeah, I'm getting a little derailed there. Eventually somewhere that led to a fascination with being in nature. That was just another intuition. And I kind of started to learn and like recognize the grand ecology that was at place there. And with other experiences with being in the wilderness for extended periods of time, with or without psychedelics, nature began to speak to me as we were speaking right now. Because when I'm in those deep states, I actually do hear her voice. And as this journey has continued, now that I've really kind of gotten in touch with that wild feminine within and without, the voice has started to shift more to a masculine voice and more of the voice of spirit and calling. So it's really interesting to see that evolution.
Mm-hmm. And along this evolution, Michael, you learned a lot about the soul. From your understanding, what is the soul?
Hmm. The one thing I can say is that if you can name it or say it, it isn't it. But what soul is the finite expression of the infinite within each of us, within each incarnation, whether it be a human being, whether it be an ant, whether it be a tree, whether it be a mountain. And it's the reflection of the infinite within a finite vessel or being. I think Rumi says it the best when he says, "You're not a drop in the ocean. You're an ocean. You're the ocean in a drop."
Absolutely. And so you help individuals nurture an intimate relationship with soul.
Mhm.
How do you do so?
Yeah.
And what are the barriers preventing people from recognizing that magnitude of connection?
Absolutely. Those are fantastic questions. And I could say also what the soul is that it's something that is absolute truth, and it doesn't have there's all the things. That's why I say, like, if you can name it, it isn't it, because they're at best close approximations. That's why all of our best poets, you know, can only try and lend us the feeling of what it's like to be in the presence of soul. So how I get people in touch with that is to one, begin to question everything about their reality, because what we see feels very real. And it's like, well, I have a table right here in front of me, right? It's like, it's solid, I can knock on it and all this stuff, but it's like, okay, has it always been a table? No, it was trees, and before it was trees, it was soil and earth and sunlight and water. And at some point that will also disintegrate back into soil, will disintegrate back into air, just as this body will as well, right? My body is going to get recycled and used in the mama matrix, most mysterious yet again. So it's really calling into question, you know, what is, and that's why you have to be careful with the different people that you sit with, because some people aren't ready to go to that level if you haven't developed enough of a somebody-ness yet, right? this is what Ram Dass says, you have to become somebody before you could become nobody. Otherwise, you're just kind of like lost in the grand amorphous soup of it all. So someone that's say like that's schizophrenic or struggling with some sort of psychosis, you can't go there quite yet. You have to really solidify their ego structure and see what traumas occurred in their lifetime or beyond that have instantiated as this. And part of that is a cultural understanding too, right? Because if you have schizophrenia in another culture, you're generally going to be put along a certain path of being a seer or being a shaman. But here we're just like, they're fucking crazy. They see things that aren't there. They believe they're real. It's like, yeah, that's the problem, Mr. Scientist, is that you believe it is real and you can't see any other reality besides that. And so the way that I work with people with this is to see the different parts of themselves, because we have an idea of who we are, and we're actually confronted with information that is dissonant with that idea a lot of the time, whether it's through self-sabotage, whether it's through dysfunctional relationship dynamics, whether it's through depression and masochism or anxiety, like all these things that we look at as symptoms in the Western canon, especially historically as we've treated psychiatry, is they're not symptoms, they're actually living energies. And so that's the kind of shift of understanding that I help people go through, is when they're like, oh, I'm experiencing anxiety or I'm experiencing depression. I know that what that is a split off part of their own consciousness and their own awareness. I'm not going to tell them that necessarily unless they're already there, because I want them to be able to come to that conclusion on their own. And the best guideposts to doing that are to be able to relate to your dreams and learn how to speak their language, not just learn what they're trying to say and trying to interpret them, because as much as I enjoy dream interpretation and getting the meaning from it, that can create an intellectual distance between you and the dream. And when you actually start drawing on more ancestral wisdom of how to relate to those dreams, when you relate to them as actual living autonomous energies within your own psyche, now you're developing a relationship. Now you're dancing, right? Now there's a generative process happening. So being able to work with dreams, being able to kind of help people restructure their understanding of themselves and how they're constellating, and like you were saying earlier, Derek, like the energies that they're putting out into the world. And that's just through like a very loving and gentle awareness, one that's not based on like trying to explain why it is that they are the way that they are, that, you know, this trauma happened and now you're this way, but it's rather that we're always involved in that process. None of us escapes trauma, and we all inflect in a way that is particular to our own being and constitution. And then it's, how do you bring those things back into awareness? Dreams are a great one. Working with your relationships is a great one. Being out in nature and remembering that grand ecology that you are, and being able to like delve, because that's when people paint pictures of trees, right? They often just paint the trunk and the branches, but there's these roots that go down very, very deep and that allow the tree to stand as tall as it does. That's the beautiful and powerful Carl Jung quote. No tree can reach to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. And it's like, yep, like all those things that you like about yourself, you're those. All those things that you don't like about yourself, you're those. And those things that you would pray to God that you are not, the things that are rapaciousness, that is genocide, that is war, also you. And by owning those, you actually make what you bring them into your awareness and into your consciousness. And now, because it is exposed to that light, now you have the energy of war, you have the energy of rape, and you can use that towards a higher purpose.
Mm-hmm. One thing I am curious about in particular, discussing more about dreams and how to work with dreams. It's something that I don't have much understanding of, uh, but my intuition um, tells me something about the feelings, and I feel in dream interpretation that I hear people look for different symbols and imagery, but I think deeper than those symbols, imagery, the visuals, is the feelings that underlie um, what is going on in the dreams, and I feel those feelings are echoes of we what is present in our real world. And
Right.
yeah, I've been noticing certain feelings in my dreams, different scenarios, different imagery, but the feelings are consistent. And I feel those feelings are things lurking in my present consciousness, like in my awake consciousness, that are not being dealt with. And they're echoing in my dream world to bring awareness of these
Mm.
underlying currents that are in my present. And yeah, I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at in this process. I'm
Hmm.
understanding my dreams, and I'm very curious to learn more about what you've learned from dreams and how you work with dreams yourself and how you help others understand them.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like I say, I use a combination of kind of traditional interpretation where, a therapist might just be like, okay, there's the mythological parts because it's all tied together, right? Like you can derive a lot of really good insight about yourself. And I think especially when you are a really intellectually identified individual like myself and like so many of us are, that having that intellectual understanding allows the ego to relax a little bit. And it also fascinates the ego. It's like, oh wow, okay, I wanted to explore this. So I'll give an example of how these two processes can work. So the first is interpretation. The second is what I would call dream body work or process-oriented psychology. And so the dream body, it kind of comes to us by because you have a body when you're in a dream, right? And it's not your actual physical body. It's like how you conceive of yourself. It's kind of like think of the training room in the Matrix when Neo first gets there, right? It's like it's not your physical body. It's just how you perceive yourself. And he has his hair and everything, right? And so by using these in conjunction, I'm able to like satisfy the intellect and also have the more masculine presence and then also the more feminine aspect of relating to the dreams directly. So I'll give an example of a dream I had. I went to I actually went on a dream retreat about a year ago with Bill Plotkin's group, the Animus Valley. And
Mhm.
the dream that I had the first night I was there, I was uh I was walking down the street in San Francisco where I was living at the time, and I'm walking with my ex-partner, and we get separated, and there's this young black man that comes up to me, and he starts poking me in the chest. And he says, hey, you owe me." I say, "Look, man, I think you got me confused." Like, he is like, "No, I know exactly who you are. You owe me." And I'm like, okay. Like, he puts me up against a wall, and I have no idea what he wants or what he thinks this is about. He's like kind of like tweaking. So I'm like, is he on meth? This sort of stuff. This is all happening in the dream for me as it's happening. And there's a police officer that walks by, but he's about 4 feet tall and doesn't really notice anything. Just kind of passes on by. And then I feel something pressing up against my chest. And he's like really pissed off. And I'm like, hey man, like I don't know what's going on. Like please don't hurt me. And we can work this out, right? And he starts to calm down a little bit. It's only then that I recognize that what he's pressing into my chest is a comb. And so if I look at the dream through an interpretive lens, it's like, okay, it's a young black man, it's a shadow figure, right? Um, I owe him something. There's something that I don't know what I did, but there's some wrong that's been perpetrated. And there's this quote unquote authority figure, but he has no power whatsoever. What can he do? He's 4 feet tall and doesn't even seem to care. Um, And what's more is that this this man, he didn't want to hurt me. He really wanted to get my attention. So he pressed something against my chest that I thought was a knife in the dream, but was utterly harmless, right? And so what we did the next day was whatever figures that you had in your dream, like you like start to embody them, do what they were doing, let them into your body. And so I started to like do that. I was like shoving, shoving the air like I was him, like I was shoving myself. And I was like, hey, you owe me. You owe me. Motherfucker, you owe me. You know?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And as that process started to happen, I was starting to realize, I was like, oh my God. We were actually starting to have like a dialogue. I was like, what do I owe you? And he said, do you see what's happened to me? Do you see that I've been on the streets my entire life and that I'm addicted to drugs because I didn't have you. I didn't have you as my parent around. I knew instantaneously at that point, I was like, this is Mikey. This is my little boy. This is my inner child, right? Who I abandoned, or who I abandoned with at the time what my mother left me because of all that stuff, right? And here he's been longing for my love and attention. And of course, when he said, "Do you owe me?" I said, "I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about." He was enraged. And so that's the kind of like the two sides of it. And what was really beautiful about that process as well is like, they're asking you to listen to your intuition and like how can you really cement this through like a ritualized process, right? And so I had an intuition that I should leave a gift for him by the river there. And so I picked a little bouquet together, I tied it together with grass, and I went and put it there. And then the intuition was to go and to that same spot the next night where I had a very, a cathartic opening into my own experience and like really welcoming Mikey back home into my heart and my life. And of course that wasn't like that was it. And like my inner child work was done at that point, but it was a very like pivotal process. And certainly you learn quite a bit about dreams, namely that we're always dreaming. Like you said, Derek, like I'd love that you did the real world, right? Because
Yeah.
this is what the Tibetans would say is that when you're dreaming, you don't say, oh, this is a dream right away. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, there's a six-headed bear, like totally happening and totally need to get away from it, right? Not for a second do you ever question that it's real while it's happening. And so
Mhm.
there's this image making part of our psyche. Not only is it continuous throughout the day, it's been with us from time immemorial, from before we were incarnated, while we were in the womb, before we had words to describe ourselves, right? It's always happening. And so I refer to the ego as more solar consciousness, more masculine, right? More very bright and discerning. There's definite objects out there, whereas there's a lunar consciousness that emerges in the evening due to the fact that the sun's light is not shining so brightly. So the stars are up above us right now, right? But we can't see them because the sun is so bright. But come the nighttime, we'll be able to fully see them. And that's when our dreams emerge, right? Is in the nighttime, when we fall asleep, when the sun of our solar consciousness sets.
There's been so much. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Dreams are powerful. They're the most visceral sense of the other side of our psyche that come to us every single night. And that's the cool thing is like I had three dreams before I was 24 that really stuck with me and that were really powerful. One was the first dream I ever remembered. One was from around the time of like 8. The other was from around age 14. And in between there, I really didn't like I had dreams, but they didn't really stick out. When I started seeing my therapist, when he told me to look at them and start to develop this relationship, then it's like once you start paying attention to it, then the psyche knows you're paying attention to it. It's like, okay, you're listening now. Here
Mm.
you go.
Mm.
And there's this intensification that happens. And sometimes that happens spontaneously, right? Some people will have a very powerful dream and be like, oh wow, uh, that really shone some light on some things that I didn't recognize before. Maybe I should pay more attention to these, and they can all happen. It depends on how it happens, but for me, coming into contact with someone who was attuned to that, namely Theo, my therapist, like that, that brought me into a relationship with this other side of the psyche that began to speak very viscerally. And I couldn't even, I don't even know like how many dreams I've had that I could kind of tell you like as if they're happening now. Like that's how firm they are in my being and in my memory, because it's not a memory thing. It's an energy thing.
Mhm. And so, how can one begin to work with their dreams? Is writing down your dreams, doing a voice recording? Like, how can we begin to work and remember our dreams, the energies, and the feelings
Mhm.
felt, as
Yeah,
well as the
absolutely.
imagery?
Yeah, so if you're starting from a base of like you barely remember your dreams, we'll start there because that's like the most definitely need to be looking at what your sleep hygiene is. So there's going to be certain things that will increase or decrease the amount of REM sleep that you're getting, right? So if
Yeah.
you're smoking weed before bed, if you're drinking any alcohol before bed, that's going to really inhibit the chances of your recall.
Hmm.
So looking at that, making sure you're getting a decent amount of time of rest for whatever your situation is. And yeah, absolutely. When you start to remember them, keep a journal by your bed, and I recommend honestly just keeping a journal just for dreams, because you start to get used to writing in the dark, and writing in the dark is honestly kind of like part of the process of like delving into the unknown and like seeing the how you go when you don't have that feedback. But writing them down, you can also record them, whatever way helps you keep the lights off, and especially if you have like a partner nearby or something like that, that can be really useful. So recording dreams is step number one, and just continuing to, it's like with anything, it's a practice. You're going to remember sometimes and not write them down. The ones that you really, really need to remember, you will always remember. I have found, or else you won't remember them, right? That's a funny thing. It's like, how do you know what you don't know? Because there have been
Hmm.
times where like I recommend good sleep hygiene, but I remember I had a horrible, horrible, horrible breakup at the beginning of 2021, and I got absolutely ripped. I was super, super stoned, and I had one of the most intense dreams of my entire life that evening, because it was one of the ones that I really needed to remember. Um, but the biggest thing you can do is start looking to your dreams as a source of actual wisdom, and like it has something to tell you, and just doing that practice from there on of writing them down, of you can speak about them with a therapist if you'd like, or with a partner or with a friend. And really not so much, especially on the beginning, not so much emphasis on the meaning, on the interpretation. Draw your conclusions where you will, just hold them lightly, but also start looking at the pieces that really, really called out to you. Like if there's a bizarre figure, that's the language of the psyche is eccentricity and weirdness. The weirder the image is, the more powerfully that image is trying to speak to you, because it's trying to combine disparate elements that don't necessarily make sense to us. So when it's really bizarre, pay attention to those ones in particular.
Okay. So, when writing down our dreams, like, what's the best way to do that? Like, when I've
Mhm.
written them down in the past, I've kind of like wrote down like everything that happened. It's like kind of exhausting, and it's like so long. Rather than like maybe I think it might be better as like some point form notes, or like what like identify key feelings or themes. I don't know. What's the best way
Mhm.
to record? Like you said, one thing that's important is
Mhm.
if there's any very like distinct, like very elaborate, out of the ordinary. Like yeah, so you're right. There was a white wizard in it, or
Mhm.
or whatever. But yeah, what's the best format that has worked for you? Right, everyone's a different person. Different things
Yeah.
work for different people. But from your experience, what has been like the key things to write that down? Right, it's dark. It's hard to see. Like how do we be the most efficient with that recording?
Absolutely. So the way that works best for me is generally I've just always had really good recall with these things, especially since that period of time. So I'll just write them in my morning journal entry and
Yeah.
essentially just go into like a mindfulness state where I'm kind of coming back into the dream. The most important thing I would say is that as you're writing them down, write them in the present tense as they're happening. Don't say like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and da da da. And write it like you're telling a story. And you're really bringing people into that world. So yeah, it is like a kind of like dreamy state that I write in, especially when I'm writing about dreams. And it's just I'm really just reliving it and not trying to poke on it too much. Just writing it as a narrative, as a solid narrative flow that I would like to, like if I were sitting around a campfire, right? This is how I would tell the story of the dream. Present tense, very important. And then after you get that the full dream down, then you can start to say like, make little end notes of like, okay, that's an important figure. Maybe I should talk to this person. I remember this feeling in my body, but that, that can also be included as in your narrative format as well. And yeah, it's really up to everyone to find what works best for them. That narrative format works for me because I do have like a very like kind of dreamy sort of sense of myself, and that works. For other people, they might want to write down key points of like, let's see, witch in a bottle, incantation, feelings of nervousness, whatever works for you. But again, that'll be more of like kind of like an analytical sense, and coming back more into the relationship sense of just, yeah. And then once you start getting more into it and start remembering your dreams and the figures are more apparent, then finding those figures like the young man to my dream that are really demanding your attention or that you want to get closer to, and actually having dialogues with them. And that can be really difficult as well. I've noticed that my ego tends to get in the way quite a lot, wanting to fill in what it thinks they might say versus what that energy in me actually wants to say. So I would say I still struggle with that even today. I've gotten a little bit better at it, but that's a pretty tough process, especially for a really intellectually identified individual to do. But Jung called that active imagination, of like actually dialoguing with the figures in your dreams because they are actual parts of your psyche. And the other part of that is because dreams are is a map of the unconscious. Nature is a map of the unconscious. This means that our body too is a map of the unconscious, right? It's like how much there's very little that our ego mind has to do. If actually it has to do, there's very little that our ego mind has to do to keep the body functioning, right? It has to like orient in the world to ensure that there's enough food and water and shelter, right? But as far as like healing your cuts, beating your heart, moving your digestive organs, you have to do none of that. It's all it's all that incredible wisdom in your body. And so those energies are going to manifest somewhere in your body. And I'll give a concrete example of that as well. I had a dream. I'm in a kitchen and I'm talking with friends, and a good friend of mine, he hands me this plate of a very, very enticing looking food, but I can also tell it's left over, and like it's starting to go south a little bit, it's starting to rot. But it still looks really enticing, it still looks really delicious, and I eat it. I eat it pretty voraciously. And then I noticed this terrible pain in the back of my shoulder. It's over here on my left shoulder. And I pull up my shirt, and there's all of these little silver bugs that are burrowing into the back of my shoulder, these little parasites. So when I woke up the next morning, I had a very strong pain in that exact shoulder. I was like, holy shit, this is a dream body sign right here. And so I worked with the projection I had on that particular friend, with the energy of the food and the rottenness of it, that it was being offered because it was rotten or because it was left over, and listening to that pain in my body. And when you work with the different energies in your body, because we're so tied with the voice in our head, it really helps to be able to switch channels, as Arnie Mindell would say, which is to put it into different modalities of energy. So our thoughts are one form of energy that it can take, but it can also take the form of movement. It can take the form of sound. It can take the form of creative expression, of art, of singing, of of really anything that you can conceive of. So by moving that energy and like just kind of staying with that process, it might move into like movement, or it might move into sound.
Mhm.
And it's really like past that, there's no explanation I can give, because you're in the mystery at that point. And whatever's going to happen is going to work in a way that makes no sense.
Yeah. Well, so much wisdom and gold shared by you so far, Michael. And a lot of this wisdom was taught to you or shown to you or exemplified to you by various mentors and helpers along the way. And you mentioned so
Mm,
many. So Dale Plotkin, Freud, your father, Theo, Eric Godfrey, Carl Jung, Aubrey Marcus, Steve Irwin. The list continues.
mhm.
Let's take a moment to acknowledge some of these mentors. Maybe there's some of the people I just named, or maybe they're otherwise. But let's just pick a couple. And who were they, and what were their primary lessons that they taught to you that you've incorporated, that you've alchemized into your being?
Mm, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. There have been so many people who have helped along this journey. And I definitely want to take time for my mother, who has been an extraordinary teacher, and watching her go on her own healing journey and awaken into her own consciousness, and all of the ways that I fantasized about her being and meeting the reality of who she is, has been huge. The Many of my mentors at CIIS, I want to mention specifically Dr. Ashley Mullins, who was my primary supervisor for my first practicum placement. So the person I was meeting with every week, and because there's like an emphasis on the primary supervisor, like that was like my main relationship, where I took all of my like most difficult material. She was an unwavering and totally supportive presence. Really helped me to see a lot of my own blind spots, helped me to understand like why I was having challenges with certain patients. Um, gave me some slack when I really needed it, in the hours when I really most needed it. Um, and also just like tuned me into the biggest blind spot of all was I recognized immediately when I first met her that I was like, oh wow, she looks a lot like my mother. So as a psychologist, you're like, fuck, I don't want to tell them that. But on our very last meeting, because we discussed like all the feelings around like termination and what that brings up and everything. And it was one of those weird things. I was like, I have no idea why this is coming up, but all I can hear in my head is it's my fault. It's my fault. And she immediately knew and recognized what that was in the moment. And I saw her communicate it through her body and then through her words, because she kind of like took a deep breath and came back, and she said something to the effect of, Michael, I really want you to know that this has been really deeply impactful for me as well, and that I'm forever changed as a result of this relationship. And that just like hit me like a ton of bricks. And I remember closing the laptop after our meeting had ended, because of course this was all over Zoom in the pandemic era.
Yeah.
And just absolute like sobbing, because there was this recognition in me of like, oh shit, I never realized like how much I impacted my mother, how much I always saw myself as a branch on her tree and not as my own tree. So just like that little moment together, and of course the year that we spent in that very, very deep container was immense. My doctoral advisor, Dr. Frank Ekenhofer, I super appreciate, not only for his deep humility and very laid back nature, but him also listening to his voice of inner guidance. He ended up retiring in the middle of my journey there, and I ended up never finishing my dissertation anyway. But he was a huge influence on that. He helped me realize that inner guidance is actually like a palpable phenomenon that I should explore and research. Um, And he also went on his own journey. He ended up leaving the institution to pursue full-time his research on Wachuma in South America. And yeah, so many people I could name. Roberto Assagioli, the founder of psychosynthesis, another depth psychology tradition. Stanislav Grof, a number of fantastic friends and advisors, I would say. Yeah, Eric definitely sticks out there. My good friend Kat Fleming, my former partner, Audrey, who taught me a lot about being embodied and about tantric Buddhism. I honestly can't name a single individual in my life that doesn't teach me something. We're all kind of mentors to each other. Yeah, yeah. I could keep going on. We could spend the rest of the the interview doing that.
Yeah, then maybe we have another conversation where we can explore and delve deeper into some more of these topics. I would really appreciate that. I've learned so much from everything you've shared so far. Um, I have a few closing questions that I ask all guests, and depending on your answers, we'll see if we get to those or not. But one of them is through it all, through all the highs and lows, that is this journey of life, that is your hero's journey. What has been the greatest life lesson you've learned on your path thus far that you feel called in this moment, in this time, in this minute now, to share with Bianca, myself, and everyone?
Mhm. Uh, mm. The greatest life lesson I could communicate is that there there are always places that every single one of us wants to be. We very gratefully recognize where we could grow and where we could be better. And that's really beautiful. However, the most important thing is coming to appreciate yourself as you are in the moment, because whatever it is that you're striving towards or trying to grow towards, that process can only be improve can only flow more naturally when you do that. And when you get to those places that you want to be, you will actually be able to appreciate them.
Mhm. Thank you for that. In 3 words, how would you describe the experience you're having on this earth? It could be 3 separate words, it could be a phrase, but how will you describe the experience you're having in your reality?
Exuberant magical wizardry.
Ha, ha. Beautiful, exuberant, magical, and wizardry. And that's something that I wanted to ask you about is the wizard that is yourself. What have you learned about wizardry?
Mhm. The wizard is a guide, He is a guide on the path to soul. And that's very much what I've tried to instantiate in myself. And what I've learned about wizards is that they derive their power from nature, You can see that played out super beautifully in the Two Towers, the second installment of the Lord of the Rings film, because you have in that film Gandalf, right? The light version of the wizard, and Saruman, who is totally disconnected from nature, who is using it towards his own means, and he is supplanted. Gandalf is able to take the white wizard status because Saruman totally dismisses his responsibility to nature. And
Mhm.
they're the ones that confront the deepest evil, like Gandalf does in the pits of Moria, right, with the Balrog. They
Mhm.
are killed through the confrontation and are reborn.
Mhm.
And they use that extraordinary power and they don't keep any of it for themselves. They know where it derives from. And they use that power to help others along the journey. Because
Mhm.
I didn't go out and I didn't set out to be a wizard. That's not what I was going for, especially not in this the culture that we live in. But I was guided that way, and through the various experiences that I had with medicine, the various experiences I had out in nature, the fact that the valley gave me a staff right after my therapist asked me to start looking for one
Mhm.
was a confirmation that it's a yeah that it's immense power and it's immense responsibility.
And to connect with our own inner wizard, from what I've heard, is us. One step is to go connect with nature, go be quiet in nature, go observe.
That is exactly right.
Beautiful. We played around with time throughout this conversation. We examined the past, we've played in the present, and let's use some of our inner wizardry and let's transport ourselves to the future. We're going to be alongside an 85-year-old Michael Ebbinghaus. Who is that 85-year-old man? Where are you? Who are you surrounded by? What are the predominant feelings in that experience? And what is the legacy that you've left behind here in your time in the infinite?
Derek, I really love your questions, man. You're a fucking fantastic interviewer. 85-year-old me. I'm living in a beautiful house in the mountains near a river. I can feel my body starting to fail me, starting to grow weaker. And I'm surrounded by, I don't know who I'm surrounded by. I see a partner there, absolutely. Someone I hope to grow old with. But other than that, just being very much a part of the woods there and knowing that I'm going to pass into a realm of even deeper mystery in the coming years as I pass and as I die. And the legacy that I've left behind is that I have, through experience, shown people, not through my experience, but through helping them foster their own, that the world, the universe, and everything is much more alive and intentional and compassionate than whatever it is that we've made it out to be here in this current situation. I know that's all changing right now, but my grand hope is that there will be places that I have a hand in developing. They are beautiful, beautiful structures. They're like universities. I call them mystery schools. They're set out in nature. They are completely immaculately interwoven with the nature around them. There are canals that run through them, and the stonework is done by masons who are really love their work. And people come there to heal, to discover themselves, and to enjoy the beautiful miracle and magic that is this lifetime and experience. And being able to explore all of the different things, whether it's, physical sciences, whether it's energy work, whether it's massage, whether it's nature journeys, all of these things will be included in that. And yeah, I want that institution to have a palpable influence on the world at large.
Wow, what a beautiful legacy. Would you like to take a moment longer? And I just want you to take a deep breath or whatever helps you feel into that 85-year-old man. Embody him, embody that 85-year-old Michael Ebbinghaus, become him, transform into his presence in this moment. And I will bring us back. I will bring us back to this present day, this present moment, this present now. And that 85-year-old Michael, he sends to you today a message. What does he whisper into your heart?
Never stop loving.
Beautiful. Never stop loving. A message for us all. It's been an honor getting to hear your hero's journey, Michael, and learning all from the wisdom you've accumulated on the path. For those wanting to connect with you more, they could find you at austinsoulcoach.com. You're currently practicing psychotherapy in Texas. On Instagram, they can find you at Michael_Ebb_Ann_flow. Bianca, closing word.
Michael, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing yourself and opening up so bravely. I'm very inspired by you, truly. And I appreciate you taking the time to share yourself with all of us today. I hope that the people who are listening enjoyed as much as I did. This has been a gift.
Thank you both so much. And it is a tremendous honor to be able to share this time with you and to share this path as well. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and with that, we say goodbye for now. See you on the path, my friend. Sending all my love to you and everyone listening because it's overflows. It's overflowing from me, and I believe it's overflowing from you as well.
Aho. Be well.
Be well.
Thank you so much.